I was raised, I guess, in the United Church of Canada, which is where I'm still a member. And I think the key things in my that always point for me to the path that I've ended up on is it's a fundamental commitment to justice that I think is part of who my church is in the country.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me, it was nurtured in my family by the kinds of values that were just kind of part of who we were and who we were taught to be.
Mm-hmm.
Values of acceptance of all people for who they were, and values of diversity, values of questioning the kinds of the way the world worked that kept some people poor, and those expecting something different for the world. My parents, or my mother's family, was a farming family. My dad's family were electricians. My dad's an electrician, construction workers, laborers, and so always really aware of or questioning of the kind of corporate culture that we can be so surrounded by,
Mm-hmm.
and committed to things like the union movement. So I think that was part of what fed me. And then eventually I came to a place in my involvement with the church where I started to recognize and link some of these things through programs that were happening, like a program we had called 10 Days for World Development, and the mission study program. And in some ways, all of those at once started to make me question some of what I'd done in university that was an economics degree, and start to look at things differently. And then I looked back and said, oh yeah, those values were there in my family all along.
Uh-huh.
So out of that, when I eventually returned to school to do a master's degree, I did it in community development, and I did the project work on the church and community development,
Mm-hmm.
or the church and social change.
Mm-hmm.
How does the church engage in social change? And then somewhere along the way in all of that process, kind of had my feminist awakening, and started to ask questions and get involved in issues around inclusive language, theology, and then I worked for a number of years for an interchurch group doing education about global justice issues. But I was reading and involved on volunteer basis in a group that was doing work around sexism, imagery, and language.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually put those together and went back to school and did a Master's of Theological Studies, and then eventually a doctorate that was focused on feminist ethics and justice for women, contextual theology, justice for women in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
the Ecumenical Decade of Churches in Solidarity with Women, all of which are kind of pieces, strands of where I am now, which is then working for the national office of our church in Interchurch and Interfaith.
Well,